The alarms were deafening. Red lights flashed down the long, gray corridor of ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States, the place no one had ever escaped. Guards shouted orders through radios as steel doors slammed shut one after another. But somewhere deep inside the maze of concrete, one man moved quietly, his footsteps soft, his breathing steady. His name was Daniel Cross. He wasn't running. He was walking, calmly, like a man who had planned every second of this moment for years. Cameras turned, searching for him, but he knew exactly where their blind spots were. He had mapped them all, not on paper, but in his mind. The sound of boots echoed from behind, guards approaching. Daniel pressed himself flat against a wall, his heart racing. One wrong move, one sound, and his chance would vanish forever. "Cell block 3 clear," a voice yelled. The flashlight beams swept inches from his face. He didn't breathe. Then, silence. When the footsteps faded, Daniel opened his eyes again. The air smelled like oil and steel. His next stop was the ventilation shaft. He had loosened the bolts for weeks using a smuggled piece of wire hidden in his food tray. It took him only seconds now to pull the cover free. As he slid inside, crawling through the narrow tunnel, sweat trickled down his back. Above him, the hum of electric current buzzed through the metal. Ahead was freedom, or death. And then he saw it. A thin beam of daylight piercing through a crack in the wall. The outside world. After 10 years in a cell the size of a bathroom, Daniel Cross could almost taste the air beyond that crack. He reached toward it. Then, a low sound behind him. A metal clang. Someone else was in the shaft. He froze. A flashlight beam flickered. "Cross," a voice whispered. "Don't move." It wasn't a guard. It was another inmate. One he thought was dead. And that's where the real story began. 10 years earlier, before the alarms, before the escape attempt, Daniel Cross had been just another criminal transfer, sent to ADX Florence after being called too dangerous for any other prison. He had once been a computer engineer, brilliant but arrogant. He'd hacked into government systems, exposing security flaws and embarrassing powerful people. When he went too far, stealing classified files, he was caught, sentenced to life without parole. ADX Florence was designed for men like him, terrorists, cartel leaders, and serial killers. It was called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Every prisoner lived in a tiny cell, 23 hours a day alone. Even their recreation time was spent in a small concrete yard, under cameras, surrounded by high walls. But Daniel wasn't like the others. He didn't fight the system, he studied it. In his first year, he memorized the guard schedules. In his second, he learned the building's layout through overheard conversations and observation. By the third year, he had begun his plan. No one had ever escaped ADX Florence. Not one. But Daniel believed no system was perfect. One night, during his solitary hour, Daniel noticed a maintenance worker fixing a vent near his cell. When the worker left, Daniel saw that a screw was slightly loose. He twisted it with a piece of metal he had sharpened from his bed frame. That was the beginning of his map, his secret path. Still, even with his intelligence, he knew he couldn't do it alone. That's when he met Marcus Reed. Marcus was a lifer too, locked away for running one of the biggest bank robberies in Denver's history. He was tough, silent, and rumored to have once killed 3 guards during a transfer. But what no one knew was that Marcus had once been a construction foreman. He knew concrete, steel, and how to make things look untouched. They became unlikely allies. Each day, they exchanged notes through the prison meal slots, written in invisible ink made from toothpaste and sugar. They spoke only in code. A simple question like "How's the weather?" meant "Are the guards watching today?" Their plan grew over 4 years. They collected fragments, metal from a broom handle, plastic wrap from food deliveries, a broken camera lens. Daniel turned them into tools. Marcus tested the walls for weak spots. Every piece mattered. Then came the moment everything changed. During a cell inspection, a young guard named Officer Bennett found a small piece of wire under Daniel's mattress. "What's this?" he asked, lifting it. Daniel's pulse spiked. "Just something I was fixing my glasses with," he said smoothly. Bennett studied him for a moment, then smirked. "You're smart, huh? You think you're better than everyone here." Daniel said nothing. That night, the guards raided his cell, tearing everything apart. They didn't find anything else, but Daniel knew they were getting too close. He had to move faster. By the next week, Marcus told him they had one chance left. "The cameras on B block go dark every Thursday night for 5 minutes," he whispered through the vent. "Maintenance reset. We move then. 5 minutes. That was all they had to beat a system built to never fail. When Thursday came, Daniel couldn't sleep. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. At exactly 2 a.m., the power blinked. Cameras rebooted. He unscrewed the vent. Marcus was already waiting in the shaft, his flashlight dimmed to a flicker. They crawled in silence. The air was thick with dust. Behind them, the lights flicked back on. 2 minutes, Marcus muttered. They reached the final section, the one Daniel had been studying for years. Beyond it was the outer maintenance tunnel, and beyond that, the razor wire fence. But as Daniel reached for the panel, something strange caught his eye, a small camera that wasn't there before. He froze. Marcus cursed under his breath. What is it? They upgraded, Daniel whispered. Motion sensor. There was no time to think. The red light on the camera blinked, once, twice, then turned solid. Alarms blared instantly. They were caught. Marcus screamed, "Go! Crawl!" They raced through the shaft as the sound of shouting guards echoed behind them. But Daniel knew there was no way out. Still, he kept crawling, driven by something beyond reason. Then, just as he turned a corner, he saw it, a beam of daylight cutting through a small crack in the concrete. He reached for it, his fingers brushing the cold air of freedom. And then, a hand grabbed his ankle. It was Marcus. But his eyes were strange. Cold. "You're not leaving without me," he hissed. The sound of guards closing in grew louder. Daniel kicked, twisted, but Marcus held tight. And then Daniel saw the impossible. The crack in the wall wasn't an exit at all. It was a decoy, something Marcus had carved to trick him. He realized then that Marcus had never planned to escape with him. Marcus had planned to betray him. The alarm screamed louder. Flashlights lit the shaft. Daniel had one choice: to survive, or to let the man who betrayed him win. He clenched his fist, raised the metal tool he'd used for years, and what he did next would shock the world. The air inside the vent was thick with sweat and dust. Alarms howled like angry beasts, echoing through the steel walls of ADX Florence. Daniel Cross's hand trembled as he held the sharp piece of metal he'd fashioned into a tool now turned into a weapon. Marcus Reed's grip on his ankle tightened, nails digging into Daniel's skin. "You're not going anywhere without me," Marcus snarled, his voice low and guttural. The shaft rattled with every vibration of the alarm, dust falling like gray rain. Daniel's pulse thudded in his ears. He could see the faint beam of daylight ahead, but his mind screamed that it was fake, a trick. Marcus had led him here, made him believe in freedom, only to turn on him. The guards' voices were getting closer. "Vent shaft B. Move. Move." Daniel had seconds, maybe less. He twisted his body and slammed his foot into Marcus's face. The impact echoed through the shaft, followed by a grunt of pain. Marcus's hand loosened, but only for a moment. Daniel swung the metal tool hard. Once. Twice. Marcus let go. The sound of his body dropping echoed down the tunnel, followed by a hollow thud that ended everything. For a moment, the world went silent. Daniel froze, staring at his trembling hands. He hadn't meant to do it, not like that. But now there was no turning back. He crawled forward, fast, desperate, the daylight growing brighter ahead. When he finally reached the edge of the vent, he pushed, and the panel gave way. Cold night air hit his face for the first time in a decade. He was outside. For a split second, he couldn't believe it. The stars above, the icy Colorado wind, it felt unreal. But the illusion of freedom didn't last long. The prison yard below was a maze of razor wire and motion sensors. Floodlights swung back and forth, painting the night in harsh white light. He wasn't out. Not yet. Daniel crouched near the wall, hidden in the shadows. He knew from years of observation that the western fence had a single weak point, an old drainage pipe covered with mesh. If he could reach it before the guards realized where he was, he might still make it. He took off running. Every step echoed in his head like a countdown. One misstep and he'd trigger an alarm. One shadow too slow, and he'd be shot on sight. He reached the pipe and tore at the mesh with his metal tool. The sound of tearing wire filled the air, louder than his heartbeat. "Stop!" a voice boomed from behind. A floodlight hit him like a punch. He froze, his body caught in white glare. On the ground. "Now!" Daniel dropped to his knees, hands in the air. But even as he did, his mind raced. He wasn't finished yet. In the chaos, something unexpected happened, a boom from inside the prison. Smoke rose from the eastern cell block. For a moment, all the guards turned their attention toward it. That's when Daniel saw it, his chance. He dove into the pipe. Cold, filthy water surged around him. He crawled through it, choking, gasping, scraping his skin against rusted metal. Behind him, voices shouted, "Crosses in the pipe." He didn't care. He kept moving, his arms and knees raw. The pipe stretched for what felt like miles until finally, light appeared at the other end, a faint glow of the moon outside the fence line. He clawed his way out and collapsed on the rocky ground, gasping for breath. He was free. But freedom came with a sound, a low hum overhead. He looked up. A drone hovered in the sky, its red light blinking. They had found him. He stumbled to his feet and ran across the desert terrain. His prison uniform was torn, his bare feet bleeding on the sharp rocks. Behind him, the faint roar of engines grew louder, trucks closing in. Daniel spotted something ahead, a small shack, half buried in the dirt. Maybe an old maintenance building. He sprinted toward it and ducked inside. The air was cold, stale, filled with the scent of oil and dust. He pressed himself against the wall, trying to quiet his breathing. The sound of tires crunching gravel stopped outside. Flashlights danced through the cracks. Spread out. His close. Daniel's heart pounded so loud he thought they'd hear it. He searched the shack with frantic eyes and saw a hole in the floor, a crawl space. Without thinking, he dropped into it and covered the opening with a loose board. He could hear them moving above him now. Nothing here. Check the perimeter. Boots thudded. The door creaked. The light faded. Silence. Daniel exhaled shakily. He waited there for hours, shivering, replaying the last moments in his mind. Marcus's betrayal, the escape, the kill. He didn't feel free. He felt hunted. When dawn broke, he climbed out of the crawl space. The world outside was quiet, almost peaceful. A few miles away, he saw a highway. He tore off his prison shirt, covered the orange stripes with dirt, and started walking. Every step away from the prison felt heavier. He had done the impossible. He had beaten the system. But in the back of his mind, one thought echoed. How long before they found him again? 3 days later, in a small diner outside Pueblo, Colorado, a waitress smiled at a quiet man sitting alone at the counter. He wore a dark hoodie and had a deep scar across his left cheek. "What'll it be?" she asked. He looked up, his eyes sharp and unreadable. "Coffee. Black." As she walked away, he glanced at the TV above the counter. A news anchor's voice filled the room. Federal officials continue the manhunt for escaped inmate Daniel Cross, who vanished from ADX Florence in what's being called the most sophisticated escape attempt in modern history. Daniel smiled faintly, his reflection flickering in the screen. He took a sip of his coffee. "They'll never catch me," he whispered. But outside the diner, in a black SUV parked across the street, 2 FBI agents sat watching. "Got him," one said, lowering his binoculars. And as Daniel Cross stepped outside into the sunlight, the faint sound of sirens began to rise again. The man who beat the system was about to learn. No one truly escapes ADX Florence.